and welcome to the Doofcast, the official variety podcast of doofmedia.com. My name is Scott Daly, a son who doesn't appreciate his mother enough.
And I'm Matt Freeman, a father who is deluded about how good of a parent he is.
Oh no. And this week on the show, we're joined by a recurring guest who has actually, it's been a bit. I think it was it the Cowboy Bebop? I don't even remember.
I think that's
anymore.
right. Or Akira, whichever one was later.
I think Akira was newer.
Yeah.
It's Matias. Matias is back on the show. Welcome back, Matias.
Hello.
Who in this week's episode will be played by a small paper tiger.
Mm-hmm. You can hear the sound effects in the background as my cats hear the word tiger and get excited.
This week on the show, we are doing another one of our patron-produced episodes. Folks who pledge to us at the Doof Warrior level or above on Patreon, that's patreon.com/doofmedia, get to select a movie or a short story for us to do a show on. And this week, Patron Joneleth asked us to take a look at a couple of short stories. One was very short, so we thought we'd get into. This is actually something that I think we've had this movie or short story line for this part, but only a couple people have ever taken us up on the short story part of it. So I love talking about short stories, so I'm excited to do that. This week, we're going to be talking about two. The first short story we're going to be talking about is the Paper Menagerie. Did I say that? Matt,
Menagerie.
I jinxed myself. Like, I know it's Menagerie, but you said I said it wrong, and I jinxed myself on it.
That's okay, Scott.
It's both. Language is a mutable thing, so
Yeah.
But the weird thing is I know it's Menagerie, but then I said it wrong the first time, and then I just blew
became
my
a
head
fool.
up. Yeah. So it's the Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu, and then Portraits of His Children by George R.R. Martin. Some of you might know him. He's kind of a big deal in the world of fiction.
Yeah.
But this is a short story that he wrote way back in the 80s. So this is an older story of his.
He's
So,
written a lot of short stories, actually, hasn't he?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was a pretty prolific writer even before he struck fame with A Song of Ice and Fire. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. But so we're going to talk about each of these stories independently, and then I think we're going to try to come together to maybe come up with a hypothesis for why Joneleth asked us to read both of these stories, because I do think they intersect in interesting ways. So that's the format of the show. Then we're going to wrap everything up with Matt and I talking about The Mandalorian, specifically the first 4 episodes of season 2 of The Mandalorian. We're going to talk about why we love the show so damn much.
I saw the trailer. Do you think I could still participate?
I mean, you could talk about like lasers and
he has to like bring a goblin somewhere, right?
Yeah, just say Baby Yoda and you've done it.
Yeah, pretty much.
This is the way.
See, I don't even know if he'll get that, Matt.
No, I got that. That's percolated throughout the internet consciousness.
Oh, has it? I can't keep track of what the internet knows and what it doesn't know. So.
I can't not keep track. So,
all right, guys, let's jump right into it and let's talk about our 2 short stories. We're going to start our conversation with the Paper Menagerie. I said it wrong again. Jesus, Matt. I know I'm saying
the
it.
thing is,
Menagerie. Menagerie.
It's pronounced in a very American way, which so you're trying to be all cultured, and it's
Menagerie.
Menagerie. Yeah, there you go. All right.
There we go. The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This is not a story we should be joking around about, because this is a very serious and very sad story. Matt, do you want to try to summarize quickly Ken Liu's story for us?
Sure. It's a fairly short story. It is from the perspective of a man reflecting on his life, or you could say a man who goes through his whole life from childhood to adulthood, and has a strained relationship with his mother because she was a mail-ordered bride from China. And as soon as he kind of became aware of this fact, he had a lot of shame about it and sort of pushed her away. And then, of course, she grows older and passes away, and then he feels terrible guilt about this. I'm really skimming over the details here, obviously, including the fact that she does paper magic. But like, that's the thing, that's just a magical realism flourish. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's just about a child growing up and realizing too late that he should have appreciated his mother more.
Yeah. It's a rough story emotionally. This one really messed me up because you're absolutely right that the story ends with the character whose name is Jack. He's half Chinese, half white, and he was too late. He was too late, and he reads a note written by his mother years ago, like saying how much his existence saved her life, and how much him appreciating his Chinese culture saved her life. And then we know he became a jerk teenager who didn't appreciate anything his mother did for him, and never reconciled with her before it was too late. But her magic lives on, right? Like there's a little bit of a happy tinge there at the end.
A little bit. Post the ending of that letter is that she can't write anymore because it hurts so much to think about it. But
oh my god,
yeah, it's strong. My parents are immigrants, so this definitely resonated a bit of. I mean, I don't think I've ever acted like this before. But yeah, there's definitely sometimes the sense of like shame of not fitting in, and like being mad at parents for not like providing you like the ability to fit in perfectly with your neighbors.
Yeah, quote unquote normalcy, right?
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And I'm very glad that didn't stick too hard to me. I've always like I definitely have more of like an American culture in the end, rather than either of my parents' homelands. But when I was growing up, there was some satisfaction in being able to claim that I wasn't American at the same time. But yeah, no, I basically just got the good parts of that. But I think it's something everyone with immigrant parents kind of experiences.
Yeah. It's probably everyone can relate in some way to parental strain and the notion of, you know, a schism with a parent, and then you let it fester, you let it grow and kind of ruin your relationship, and then eventually that parent's going to be gone and you're going to regret that. I think that's something that everybody can relate to. So I like short stories where, I mean, it's finding the general and the specific, right?
I think that's what this story succeeds at the most, right? It is a very specific thing that I have never experienced, which being the child of an immigrant that is kind of, he's biracial and he's caught between these two sides, and he's in America, so the American side wants to win. That's not something I've ever specifically experienced, but I do think the idea of, you know, a child growing up and the way in which children eventually pull away from their parents is just a universal of life, right? And so it is very specific in some ways in which it works, but it is also very relatable, because I think this is something we've all gone through, and I don't think we've gone through it as parents yet, but Matt, that's coming down the pike. One day your kids will not want to hang out with you all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting because right now, like, I have this attitude of like I'm like, I always just accept when they're horrible to me for whatever reason, because it's just like, yeah, but you're little, like, you don't actually hate me, right? Like, and I know that, but it might become harder when they look and act like adults, and then they're saying these things, and because then you can't just write it off anymore.
Yeah,
and I don't think that necessarily happens with everyone. I mean, I never really had a phase where I screamed at my parents and told them I wanted nothing to do with them, but and so I hope I can just avoid that. But you know, we'll see, I guess.
Teenage Scott did not get along with his mother very much at all. So that part of the story really, really related to me. That you know, you grow to resent the things about your parents that are part of you, whether you want to admit them or not. And I think part of becoming an adult is realizing that these things about your parents that annoyed the shit out of you and maybe still annoy the shit out of you are part of you, and they're part of makes you who you are. And that's I think one thing that's just beautifully depicted in the story. I mean, the menagerie is basically, hey, I said it right.
Yeah, you did it.
The menagerie is basically just a big metaphor for her culture, right? That for the Chinese side of him, and for this thing that she's trying to pass on to him, and that he is continuously rejecting. I mean, I love the push and pull between this beautifully constructed, living, breathing paper tiger and like a piece of shit Han Solo action figure.
Yeah.
That like it's just perfect. It's this perfect depiction of And of course, like I know as a kid, I probably would have gone for the action figure too because it's Star Wars and that's cool. But
Well, why can't Luke just ride the tiger? But
that's true.
Yeah, I really liked the whole like that he's pushed it away so much that he's like no better than his father. Like there's this reflection where like or originally when his father got his mail order bride, he had to get like a waitress to translate for them to talk to each other, and then here at the end he needs to find a random person to read his mom's letter to him, and it's like through that filter of just a random bystander.
Yeah. It's so divorced and separate and lack of real intimacy at all. Yeah.
And then later on his girlfriend is the one that appreciates the origami. She's the one that decorates it everywhere. And I'm wondering if there's more significance there of like maybe just like needing an outside perspective to appreciate what you don't.
Yeah, and I think he's saying the women in his life are able to draw out this side of him that he wants to reject, and that is really interesting because I do think like his father is
this is not a bad person.
He's not a huge figure in the story, but yeah, I mean, like you sit here and you wonder, like, oh my god, how like.
The one thing I know about this man is that he got a mail order bride. Okay, like that's
yeah. But like you're thinking about like I as a future parent in a few months now, I'm thinking about, oh my god, how can I make sure that this thing where my kid doesn't fully hate me like never comes to pass? What can I do to make sure this happens and I avoid the tragedy of the situation? And I think part of that is having a partner that is like on your team and supports you and is willing to push back against your kid, which is something that the father in the story is just completely unwilling to do. And I think it's because he has the same complaints and embarrassments and an uncomfortable, the uncomfortable nature of her culture as well. He like one of the refrains of him is like, you have to speak English. You have to speak English. And he's not, did he bother to learn any Chinese? No, of course not. It's because he like, it's he's not great.
I think a word that we haven't said very many times in this conversation, but should be in here is shame.
Yeah.
Because both the father is basically ashamed of the fact that he brought this woman over from China and kind of he's ashamed that because he knows everyone is sort of judging him because they know what he did. Like it's obviously the scuttlebutt of the town that he has this mail order bride who doesn't speak English, and everyone is terribly racist about it, and he has kind of internalized it. Like he's not like fuck you guys. Like I marry who I want. He's like ashamed about it, and the son absorbs the shame instead of being I mean as a kid I think you can't just shrug it off when people are cruel to you about who you are, but the kid also absorbs the shame. So everyone is ashamed not only of the fact that she's like a Chinese immigrant, but of the fact that she's specifically a mail order bride, which is a socially unacceptable, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the extra wrinkle on the thing, because it's more than just like, oh, this is awkward because she doesn't speak the language very well. It's like her whole existence here is kind of a shame. It's a token of shame over the household, basically, and he just wants to pretend it doesn't exist, right? That's the read I got anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on there, and I think she feels some shame because I think she's feel like feeding off of the shame that they feel about it too, and it makes her ashamed of herself, and that is tragic as well.
Yeah, I think the confusion of looking at her child and not understanding like why he's so angry is it's one of the saddest parts about it, is that she just doesn't fully understand why he's rejecting everything, because it's an external thing that he's internalizing that she doesn't really have a connection to.
I love the line when like she's telling him she loves him, and his father is like no, you have to say it in English, and where she says like when I say it in English it comes from here, pointing to her mouth, but when I say it in my language it comes from here, pointing to her heart, and so I need to say it from here. And that's like a beautiful sentiment that neither of the men in her life appreciate at all.
Yeah.
Like they just completely dismiss it, and it's like it just breaks your heart. And like I don't want to assume I know nothing about Ken Liu, like how much this was a personal story or just an invention, like how much of this is part of his story or anything. I think probably not the details, but probably this feeling of cultural confusion and the push and pull to want to identify perfectly with your culture. And I like that the book, or the story rather, like it just builds it to at first to be about survival, where he just wants people in school to leave him alone, and the easiest way to get left alone is to just fade into the background and just be just an American, like to just not look any different, to just be normal. And that is a perfectly understandable reaction for a kid, right? It's just like you're not thinking of the fact that, hey, this is disgusting and wrong what these kids are saying about you and doing. It's just, I just want to survive. And so it starts that way, and then it just builds upon itself. And if you don't have a figure in your life like a good father to say, hey, no, you stop it, it'll just compound upon itself.
Yeah, his reactions when the boy is basically reveals to him that he's being treated terribly in terribly racist ways. His reaction is so lacking. It's pretty miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like, oh, that's what's gonna happen, like he expects it. But then Jack grows up to have like such cruelty or such, no, not cruelty, callousness towards his mother. Like she's on her deathbed, and he's like, I gotta go catch a flight. Like, horrible.
he hates her. Like that is the surprising part to me, is that how, like, the way in which I think the story is trying to get across how this what starts as shame can over time, if not treated, manifest into hatred in this incredibly cruel way. Like it's one thing to like say, oh, this side of me embarrasses me. It's another to actively despise it and to lash out in that way and treat her so bad. Yeah.
I wonder how much of this, like the moral that Jack is receiving, right, of making sure to connect to your parents and to your culture, I think is definitely very strong when it it stays within the context of like connecting the culture of your parents. I do wonder, like, if we're expanding it out to it being about just like reconnecting with your parents and forgiving them for things. Like, obviously the mother in this didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right. So she's kind of completely innocent in this. But then I think it gets more complicated when, like, if you actually do have shitty parents, and deciding whether or not to reconnect and whether or not they like whether or not to stay angry, even if like you might be righteous in it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a complicated relationship. Like, we don't really know what his relationship like with his dad is. We know it's maybe better than the relationship he had with his mother, again, self-imposed, but like what I mean, all we see is dad aged rapidly after mom died is really all we see about his dad, which is an interesting wrinkle as well, because it like shows that perhaps he did love her or grow to love her, or she was an important part of his life. And, I think losing her did something to him.
I think they did. I mean, there's sort of the implication in how like it follows the beats of a romantic story where like he goes to see her and she doesn't have any of the things that was like advertised in the catalog or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't speak English or dance or anything, but in the end, like, still decides to take her. So like clearly there's some sort of like connection there, and it wasn't like it's not portrayed in a way where it was like crass or something.
I do love when his son, when Jack first learns that his mother was in a catalog, his reaction is not what kind of guy picks a wife out of a catalog, it's what kind of woman puts herself in a catalog. It's such a wonderfully cruel reaction, because like he puts none of the blame for this situation on his father and all of it on his mother. He's the one that bought her out of a catalog.
That's fascinating. I mean, I think both, we're going to talk about the other story in a bit, but that's the thing that's in common with both of these stories, obviously, is the complexities of the parent-child relationship, and like because it's such an important relationship, there are things where it's like it can break worse than anything else, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to process, you know, what Matias just said about like the difficulty of, because the story is clearly saying, you know, it's clearly encouraging, you know, you the reader to reflect and say like, do I need to forgive my parents for the things that they quote unquote did wrong? Because that's the thing, is when you're this kid, you're thinking my mom is embarrassing. My mom is embarrassing because she's doing all these things to me, and the things she's doing to you is being Chinese and not automatically knowing how to speak English, right? So like definitely it's very normal to be mad at your parents about things that make no sense, but it's also very normal to be mad at your parents about stupid mistake, like actual mistakes that they made, right?
Yeah.
Like that those are both true. Like that's I think that's the fun thing about doing both of these stories, is I think that the parent in the second story we're going to discuss in a minute is a terrible person.
Mhm.
And so it's do you owe it to that parent to forgive them? But another thing that I've just kind of noticed in my life is that I've just never seen anyone successfully cut out a parent. Like like they want to, they say they're going to, they say they cut them out. 2 months later, they're talking to them again. This is just how people are, as far as I can tell. Like I've just never seen anyone successfully cut out their parent. I think that's the thing, is it's such a deep root in your mind that it's very difficult to actually manage that.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't know if I know a lot of people in my life that have tried and not failed, or failed. I mean, I don't know if anyone, like, I think most of the people I know in my everyday life have fairly good relationships with their parents. So I don't know.
Yeah, all the people I know are pretty early in that. So yeah, no, I'll let you know in 20 years if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the weird things about being in your mid-30s, right? Is that I think your relationship with your parents changes, and I think you saw, Matt, when you started having kids, it probably changes again, and I'm about to see that. But it's really interesting watching that relationship change over the course, because they're always your parents, but your the way you relate to them is fundamentally different at 35 than it is at 20 than it is at 10.
I mean, that's one of the key things that I would say here, is just like when you're a parent, you make mistakes, and you just realize like, I would have to actually be superhuman and have like foresight from the future to like not make mistakes. Like it's just an impossible task. There's no such thing as doing it right. Like what does that even mean? You can avoid doing like intentionally terrible things, obviously, and you can be as good of a person as you can be. Yeah, you can always, and you should always be trying to do better, obviously. Yeah, of course. But it actually enables you to look at a lot of this stuff that maybe you hold against your parents, or maybe you the stuff that maybe you kind of still hold against your parents even as an adult, and just be like, okay, he or she, they're just a person. Like they like,
I think the important sentiment is, to me, kind of just seems like them wishing that they could have done better, right? If there's like unrepentant and we're like, nope, that horrible thing that you feel is horrible, it was actually a really good thing, and I'm really happy I did it. That's a whole different perspective.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, which I think is going to come up again when we talk about our second story, because like that's what makes him a bad person. Yeah, exactly. Like that's why I just sort of casually call him a bad person, because he's just like, because he insists that he's a good person while doing all these things that he does.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I liked about, I think, talking about, changing in relationships, I wonder if there's the Jack needed to be at the age he is now to get to a place where he can read that note and it affects him the way it does, which is, I think a perfect through line. It gives him shame, right? Like he starts off ashamed of who he is, and then at the end he's ashamed of the fact that he did not embrace who he is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's the same emotion, but twisted around a little bit. But I wonder if like he needed to be this age. I mean, I think it's, again, I do think it's key that it was his girlfriend that took these things out of the box and put them around the house and allowed them to enter back into his life, to allow his culture to root its way back into who he is, because he was literally shoving it into the back of a closet for so long. So like he needed to be at a certain age, he needed to be, and I think the tragedy of it is that it took until this time in his life and this person in his life to pull that out of him, and it was too late. And so hopefully for all of us it won't be too late if you have a strained relationship with your parents and you want it to be better. You never know.
I had a certain read of a small element in here that maybe is unique to me. I'll bounce it off you guys, see if you saw the same thing. But like, the kid brings the Obi-Wan Kenobi toy, and then so like imagine you're a little kid and you bring your action figure over to your friend's house, and then your friend has a fucking magical origami. Like you're not gonna be like, no, my Obi-Wan toy is better. You're gonna be like, that's the coolest shit I've ever seen. But maybe if you're a shitty little kid, you'll pretend that you don't think the origami thing is cool, right? Because you're jealous. You're jealous of the magical, of the magical, amazing, unique, and special thing that this kid has that you don't have. And so the implication being, even the racism and bigotry is sort of from a place of almost jealousy of like, you're special. We see that you're special and we resent that. And then when he finds someone who loves him later in life, she sees that he's special and she loves that. And so she decorates the house with it. And that's the difference.
The origami is specifically described as like beautiful. And I mean, whether or not it's like actually magical or whatever, like I think that holds exactly the same water of a kid looking at this beautiful thing. And I mean, his breaks, right? Obi-Wan's head comes off easy peasy.
Yeah.
So
they're shitty toys. I had some of those toys. They're not that well made. They're not great. They're certainly not the art, which I think his girlfriend says to him, your mother was an amazing artist, the first time she sees these things, because they're incredible. And I think that is one thing that I think Ken Liu is doing here, is that he knows that the readers of this story are going to see the origami as exactly what they are, which are incredible and amazing, and something any human being would just feel floored to have. And so, of course, when we see his friend's reaction to it, and we see when he eventually turns and dislikes it, there is some confusion there. And I think it wants us to feel this, like, why?
What a loss.
Like that's part of the tragedy of it. Like, it's obviously incredible and amazing. Like, who wouldn't want a freaking shark that swims around, like a real shark that swims around? That's so cool.
Made out of tinfoil. Yeah, that was wonderful. All the little bits are with them are wonderful. As I mentioned before, I love the water buffalo. It goes inside the soy sauce because it wants to wallow like a real water buffalo, and they have to fix it up, and that's adorable.
It is.
So like one thing that is also part of it that's tragic is that presumably there's no more paper magic, because her entire village was basically like gone because of the Great Famine. And she could have taught it to him, but he wasn't interested in it.
They could have passed that on, and it lives. I mean, the story ends with him holding the thing and it's purring, but it's not because he has the magic. It's because it's the last remnant of her magic. I
think the implication is maybe it will only be alive one day a year, perhaps. Or
I think that's right.
And I mean, there is definitely like some talk of loss of culture there, if we connect it to our metaphor, right? That like if we try so hard to transform and abandon the culture of the place we came from to absorb ourselves into the culture of the place we are, then there is some permanent loss there that we'll never get back. And that is absolutely part of the tragedy of the story. It bummed me out. It really bummed me out reading the story. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think the writing is very, very good. I haven't read much. I haven't read anything by Ken Liu until this story, I think the only thing I had read was his translation of the 3-body problem.
Well, you've seen one of his works before, actually. So I read the Paper Menagerie and other stories, and one of them was turned into an episode of Love, Death and Robots, actually. So there's that one episode that is about it's a Chinese man and his like father. They're hunting what are they? The monsters, the fox ladies that do magic.
Okay.
Kitsune.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're named that in the story, but that's his job, and they like kill the mother of one, and then she like grows up and they're like friends, and then like the English come in and colonize everything, and then he grows up and like turns her into like a robot. Robot Kitsune. Yeah, that's his story.
Okay. Cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty good. There's some other great ones in there. I remember reading another one from that collection that's actually I forget exactly what it's called, but it was about basically like a Google AI sort of like just search engine optimization kind of like taking over everything. That was more just like a corporate thing. It was very spooky. And other stuff. Yeah. Cool. He's a good writer.
Yeah.
I mean, I went out and I bought the whole book of the short story collection that this 10-page story was in because I was really curious. So I'm definitely going to read the rest of his stories here and see because I definitely enjoyed his writing. There is just he captures like melancholy really well. Like there's just a sadness that permeates the story before you even really get to the depths of the tragedy of the lack of relationship. Like it just feels sad from the very beginning. Like even it starts with him talking about how his mother created this beautiful animal for him and breathed life into it, and that's like an amazing, wondrous moment. But the melancholy seeps through that still, I think. It's part of the way he handles tone. It's really good.
Yeah, I was impressed by how many different emotions and how strong of emotions it made me feel in such a short number of words. I really like when I got to the end. I was like, yeah. I think Scott, you had told me that it affected you, and so I was like,
yeah.
I saw how short it was, and I was like, I wonder if this is going to affect me if I'm expecting it to affect me. And it still did, obviously. But I was like, that's so fascinating how powerful stories are to like, even if you're like, okay, this is going to be sad. I'm going to read some words and they're going to be sad words. And then it doesn't matter how prepared you are. It still makes you sad.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Anyone have anything else they wanted to say about the story before we move on to the next one?
I just really appreciated the magical realism and how it was used. I just like, if any, I think from now on, this might be one of my go-to examples of like magical realism working well.
It's perfect because it is like obviously an important part of the story, but it doesn't pervade the story. Like this is not a story about the paper animals. This is a story in which the paper animals are used to explore something. And
right.
Which is
that's how you should use magical realism or fantasy elements in general, in my opinion, is as a metaphor. So,
sure.
Yeah.
It to me, I always call back to like just old stories, like where the supernatural just isn't special. It's just we're telling a folktale. This is what happens in a folktale. I just want to mention that it won all 3 Hugo, Nebula, and World Fantasy Awards. It's the first work of fiction to ever do that.
This story?
Yeah, this story, the Paper Menagerie, which I find fascinating because it's not like it's an excellent, it's like a perfect story, but it also isn't like an entirely like new like direction to think. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's not like there's some other short stories that like blow me away in like I've never read anything like this before, but this was like a perfectly executed story about Parenthood.
Yeah, I feel like like Parenthood and the struggles of culture clash and immigration and being a biracial child in a world is something that storytellers write about a lot. It's a very relatable struggle for a great many people. But I agree, it's not like the most original topic in the world. But yeah, I do think that Lou really just like he just execution is sometimes everything, and he just crafts this very short, very quick, very efficient gut punch of a story.
I found the name of the other story I mentioned. It's called The Perfect Match. So if anyone wants to read that one, it's also online.
Cool
to read.
Cool.
Awesome.
He also has a trilogy out, a fantasy trilogy. That's it's Silk Punk, which is a new genre. I just wanted to mention as well. I forget what's it called again. Oh goodness, I think it's the Dandelion trilogy. That sounds about right.
Yeah, one of his books is on like the Goodreads Reader's Choice Awards are happening right now, and his story is a finalist in that. The Hidden Girl, I think it's another short story collection actually, is a finalist that just came out this year. So
the Dandelion Dynasty, that's what it is. With the first book is The Grace of Kings. It's like a fictionalization of like actual Chinese history. It's really well done.
Oh, cool. I want to check that out. All right, let's move on to our second story. Let's talk about Portraits of His Children by George R.R. Martin. This is a longer story. I think the first one was about 10 pages. I think this was like 25 or 26 manuscript pages. I'm not sure how much that rolls out. This is a hard story to find, so I don't know how many people have read this one that are listening. I was talking to Matt before we started recording how odd it is that I love George R.R. Martin. I really enjoy Song of Ice and Fire. I've read all 5 of those released books many times, and yet I have not read anything else that George R.R. Martin has written. So this is the first thing of his that I've read that is not a Song of Ice and Fire. So this, how do we explain what this story is, guys? This is a little complicated.
Well, it's a Christmas Carol. That's step one.
It is a Christmas Carol.
Yeah,
it's so much of a Christmas Carol that it cites itself as a Christmas Carol.
Yeah,
it's a story of a writer.
It's a story about writing.
Yeah,
yeah. It's just, yeah. You want to do it?
I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try if you want me to. It's a story of a man named Richard Cantling, who is a writer of, I think, 9 successful novels. Well, some successful, some not. Who has a very strange relationship with his daughter, and then suddenly one day, some a portrait shows up at his house, and the portrait is a perfect depiction of one of his characters as painted by his daughter. And then every time later that night, the character in the portrait comes alive, and he has a nice conversation with him, and this process repeats.
Conversation.
Yeah, it's a very lovely conversation. This process repeats 4 times as we learn more about him and his relationship with his wife and his relationship with his daughter, and
how they're not good,
and how they're awful because he's awful, as Matt has hinted. So yeah, it's a Christmas Carol, and it's also an examination of, inspiration and obsession and cruelty and jackassery.
Just authors in general too. Like what does writing, what is it used for, and what are the consequences of it being used certain ways? And where do characters come from? I think is a big one.
And inspiration and how all this stuff reads into how you create and what that does to the people that are forced to live with you. Matt, what did you think of this story?
Well, we're going to talk about the ending later on, so I'll set that aside. Setting aside the ending, I liked it a lot. I liked, basically, it's a meditation on writing and where ideas come from in writing. Like, that's what I saw it mainly as being. Like, George R.R. Martin being this writer and kind of reflecting and maybe even struggling a bit with the idea that a lot of what, maybe he feels this way, maybe he's just writing about it in the abstract, but the fact that writers feel like a lot of what they write comes from their lives, and various of his characters basically confront him and they're like, yeah, you clearly stole all of the stuff that I did from these friends that you had. And and also, but then on another layer, you fantasize that you were as cool as I am.
Yeah.
And or like one of his characters, which is literally just a manifestation of his horniness, and lack of sexual fulfillment in his marriage, I suppose you could say, and like turn that into a character, which he then became famous for. And then another of them is sort of like him sort of trying to be autobiographical, but still being a bit too what's the word, like gilding the lily a bit too much, like not
embellishing.
Just making it seem like there's all this depth to him, even in the struggle and the misery. And then I don't know how to talk about the last one because I don't know what the hell's happening in the story at that point, like what actually happened versus what was a fantasy. But
yeah, I kind of want to treat the ending as a separate thing. The twist at the ending as an entirely separate thing that we can talk about what the final character, the final portrait means in outside of what the final twist says about everything we've just witnessed. I mean, the last one I think is the most disturbing, and what the story beautifully crescendos to is the realization that he has cannibalized his daughter's rape into a story. She told him in confidence all the details of what was done to her because she needed to get them out of her. She couldn't keep them inside her anymore. So she tells it to the one person she trusts and loves more than anything else, her father. And he turns around and takes that and writes it all in a book. And perhaps like that action on its own is terrible, but his complete lack of understanding as to why that would be something that would break her heart and hurt her is the worst part of it. I think, some of the best writing I think in the story is how she's explaining like every minute in the world someone is reading about what happened to me. And I can't, every time I walk by a bookstore, I'll see it. Every time I think about it, I'll know someone is experiencing it through your words. And it's just, you just feel horrified and terrible for her.
Yeah. He's like, but he's just a symbol. And she's says, no, he was not a symbol to me. He was the man who raped me.
He's the literal person who did this to me. Yeah.
But my favorite parts of the book is when he like bloviates about his writerly justifications for why he did things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's a symbol of the evil in every man. And you're just like, oh my God, shut up.
Yeah.
You're so annoying.
Yeah. Matias, what did you think of the story?
I liked it. It was dark, but messing around with terrible emotions sometimes is good for you. And getting righteously angry at a character, I think, is also sometimes good for you.
Yeah.
It poses some serious questions of just like how much does your portrayed identity belong to you? It's something that it came up a bit for me.
I mean, the parts from the Ghost of Christmas Past, the character he created that was supposed to be him as a child, and we basically see there that was all bullshit. That is all he borrowed from the friends he had, not from himself. And so how much like I think one of the fun things to me is outside of just writing, outside of being a writer and being a creator, how much of our lives is just a story we're telling ourselves in which we're the main character and we're remembering our past as if we were the protagonist of that particular story. And so it had to be me that did that thing because that's what makes the best story.
Yeah. It turns into being like writing for him is a way of padding his own ego and like almost rewriting his own life, which I think maybe puts the ending in a better situated context for me, at least, because you can say, it's the Christmas Carol, except instead of confronting each phase of his life, he's just realizing that he's realizing that he's used his writing as a way to reconstruct a better version of each phase of his life so that he can think that it was better than it was.
That I think actually that fits very neatly. Well, how does the last one fit in with that one then?
Well,
good question.
That he gets to believe that he had a daughter that he never had is one way you could say that.
But it's so okay. Let's talk about the end.
Yeah.
The end of this book or this short story is we learn that this was not his daughter sending him these portraits. he doesn't have a daughter, and this is just artwork he commissioned from an artist. So like at the very end, he gets another package from an artist that has the 4 books that he took portraits from. Presumably he sent those books to the artist to tell them construct what they look like from my writing. And that's so everything in the story was made up. Maybe at least for sure his daughter was made up.
I don't know if it's for sure though. I mean, I don't know if maybe he would be like in denial about it, but I think she affects the story too much for like why would the portrait be slashed apart like in the beginning?
Yeah,
but part of it.
Well, was that all made up?
Yeah. Okay, well.
Yeah, we don't know if anything happened. That's the thing. So I'm just gonna say right out, like I didn't like the ending. It was like the whole story was building toward a moment that was gonna punch you in the gut, and then instead, the author squirted you in the face with their boutonniere, and you're like, well, wait, well, that's not the emotion that like, what are we doing with this story? Wait, this is, and then you're just emotionally confused and plot confused. And then you ask your friend, what the hell was that? and it's just not, it's just the wrong ending for this story, because what's supposed to happen is he learns his lesson, right? Or he fails to learn his lesson and he gets murdered.
Punished. Yeah.
Well, yeah, he gets punished, right? But this was just, all of that wasn't real, and there is no lesson because he actually didn't do anything wrong because he didn't have a daughter.
That's what I'm saying though. I don't think that is the ending. I think he's just like slipping into like a madness. Like this is that nothing supernatural happened. He was imagining all of this, right? But he was imagining the ghost, not necessarily the actual like things that the ghosts are talking about. Otherwise, they wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this isn't clear is I think part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like at the end it says he's listing like the 4 portraits he has: Donahue, his firstborn, the boy he wished he'd been; Sissy, his true love; Barry Layton, his wise and tired alter ego; Nicole, the daughter he'd never had. And so, yeah, I mean, you could say that this is he's just deluded himself into thinking he's never actually had a daughter. But then, like, why put the point in there where he gets the message from the artist, like giving him his books back, sending him the bill and saying, are you going to need anything else? Like,
yeah,
what is that
right
for?
Because I almost for a second I believed, okay, so his daughter, the punishment for his sin is that she has magicked away all memory of herself.
Yeah. She's literally removed herself from his life.
Yeah,
because that's a part of what she says is, you are not my father. I am not your daughter. I never want to see you anymore. I don't want anything to do with you. And she's excised herself completely from his life.
Yes. And that still may be true, but the note that made me think it wasn't is what you just said, that he then gets this bill and a letter from the artist he commissioned, which, like, why would you add that detail into the story if not to imply, oh, he commissioned all these, that this is all.
It does intentionally confuse a lot, no matter what your interpretation is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it undercuts what I thought was the entire message of the story.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Matt, that from this lens, the message becomes, oh, we, and by we I mean humans, but maybe more specifically here, writers, creators, create our entire lives, and our entire lives are just a narrative we tell ourselves. And so this is a person who is so obsessed with his creations that he creates creations to create from his creations, right? Like, so it's not enough for him to just create this woman who goes through this terrible trauma, but he has to create this backstory in his real life that was the impetus for the creation of this character. And it is, interestingly enough, it is a story in which he looks like the bad guy. Like he is a person that creates this fake story in which he is the worst possible version of a human being to do this terrible, terrible thing. So he's created this version of his life in which he's miserable and alone and everyone hates him. And it's not even real. Like, it's one thing to create a daughter, right? It's another to create a daughter that hates you. He made a character that hates him. I that is interesting, right? That is an interesting idea to explore, but it is contrary, or not contrary, but it's so entirely different from what I thought was the theme of everything that has come before it that I just don't get it.
I don't get it, and I don't like it. I mean, we had to talk about the ending, but I just want to talk about what I thought the story was up until the last handful of paragraphs.
I think that the interpretation of the ending, where not everything's actually made up, where like he does have the daughter, I think does line up with the rest of the book. Yeah. So like I feel like analyzing the whole rest of the book is probably the right way to go, where like you actually have more evidence and things to pull from.
I mean, we could literally just cut out a week later, another much smaller package arrived inside where the carton were copies of his 4 novels and a bill. Just cut that part out and then just say, okay, this is a story about the ways in which our creations leech themselves from our lives, and most importantly, what it does to the people in our lives that we love. Because that is this man's indifference. Like the conversation with his wife about the name Edward is like, holy shit, terrible.
Yeah,
right?
God, that reminds me why I love George R.R. Martin. Like he's so awful. That and like the way that he has of twisting the knife on certain things, like with the "show me where it hurts" line. Being this sweet little thing he says to his daughter, and then he uses it for the name of the book where he ruins her life. And it's like, that is classic George R.R. Martin.
Yeah. That's the thing I felt the most reading this, was that he is so good at writing despicable people that make you so angry. He is so very good at that.
Yeah.
This character, being in this character's head is like, it's an exercise in frustration and anger, because you're just so mad at him the entire time. I think the way he like, and I love the way he builds to it, right? Like it starts slow, where like at the very beginning of the book, there's like little moments where you're like, that's an interesting way of taking that. And
it starts on the very first page. I don't know exactly what it was, but there's just like a phrasing in like the first paragraph. You're like, oh, this character is going to be a dick. Just right at the beginning.
Yeah.
I like. Sorry, just one thing where like it happens a few times where he'll be living his life, and then it's like, you know, his wife flushed beet red, he thought for a moment, then rejected it as too trite.
Yeah, he's so like, that's the great thing, is this character, like even in his narration is knowledgeable of storytelling, right? Is knowledgeable of like that he's trying to construct a story, and so he doesn't even like, I don't like that reaction, it doesn't work, I'm gonna change it. Yeah. He's such an asshole.
So one thing, I think I touched on it, but I don't think I said it very clearly the first time through when we were going through each of the characters. Like what I like about it is there are many ways that you draw art from your life, and they affect things in different ways, right? So there's really the only time that he just strictly steals a story from someone else is when he just steals his daughter's tale and is like, this is my tale now and I'm writing it. But then like the teenage girl who's basically his sex fantasy, like that's not from his life. That's from his frustration, right? That's from that. It is from something in his life though. And it's like his way of trying to like lash out at the world and fix his own life is to make this character, but it only hurts, right? It only hurts to do that. And then of course like you pointed out, Scott, the first one, he did kind of pick and choose things from the lives of his friends, but that was less about him like stealing somebody else's story and more about him trying to make himself as a human being feel more important and cooler than he was.
Yeah. Definitely. I was just thinking about one of the things I love about him is how he continued this constant refrain of, I mean, I'm not the perfect person. I probably spent too much time working, but I'm a decent person. I loved my daughter. I loved my wife, and how every one of these characters call him out on it. Like, remember when he's like, when I was little, I would write little stories in my spare time for my daughter. I would just write her little stories. And then the guy's like, oh, you mean the ones you tried to get published? Because it's not just enough to make something for your daughter. It has to work its way into your career. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. There is something, I can't remember the exact line or where it was, but there's something where she comes over and says something that is clearly not an apology. Like it is 100% not an apology. And his response is like, it's not the best apology. And it's like, she's not apologizing to you.
Yeah.
And he's so ignorant of everything that's going on. And it makes what happens to her like so horrible. And the way he George R. R. Martin structures the writing is we just learn about the rape so late in the story. Like we're already aware of how much of an asshole he is by then, but like the way in which Cantling like doles out his information to us and makes stuff clear later and later. Like it starts out with like the only thing we know is that his daughter destroyed a portrait of herself that he loved. And so it's almost as if like he's trying to win you over. He's trying to get you on his side, like because
we
start
off with him being wronged. Yeah,
like she did this thing to him. She was cruel. She was mean about it, and he sees the package and immediately like here's her reconciliation. And we don't at that point we don't understand because of course he hasn't bothered to explain why the fight started in the first place, why the incident started in the first place. It's only until the very very end that we get that.
I love the tension that Martin is able to create with the package because and how he structures the whole thing because like you know pretty quickly that this painting is not going to be a replacement portrait.
Oh, of course not. Yeah,
but he doesn't know that, and I think it's really cool how Martin was able to do that so quickly. Right, he very quickly gives you the impression this guy's an idiot. He thinks this is going to be like a replacement of the original portrait as an apology, but clearly I, the writer, have let you know that this guy is totally in the wrong, and there's no way she would have apologized. And so you should be wondering, what is this painting actually?
Yeah.
And so when he finally opens it, you're like full of suspense, even though the character himself is totally expecting to see a portrait of his daughter. It's just I love how he orchestrates that, and so deftly. It's great.
Yeah, it's just in a couple of sentences, some stuff like, oh, how unusual. We're stubborn people. We don't expect this. So, well, how wonderful it is that,
but he betrays himself. I think Martin does it brilliantly. You're absolutely right that like he's so assured of himself, but then there's little lines in there that betray the truth of it, because as he's opening that first portrait, he's like I'm so eager to see what my daughter had done, because she's older now. She's nearly 30 now, right? Or wait, or is it past there? I can never remember her age or her birthday for that matter. And you're just like, it's just a perfect way of just like slipping these things in when you're like, wait, what? And it's so good. It really is. It's very well done.
Yeah.
But that damn ending.
Yeah.
Right. I wish I had a clear grasp on exactly what he was trying to do there and how it doesn't change it so much to where it takes away from what I thought the story was doing.
Yeah.
But also,
how is it intended to accentuate the main meaning? I think that's because I feel like I have enough faith in George R.R. Martin that like I don't think he meant for it to undercut the entire meaning.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things where by the time she's telling the story of what happened to her dad, I think I had kind of caught on what's happening, right? That he's going to write a book about it, and it's that this is what's caused the fight, and the final portrait is going to be of the woman in that book, and they're going to have some big confrontation. And that's how the story is going to end. And I had a firm grasp on what it was doing and what it was trying to say. And I was interested in seeing how he was going to tie all that up into the main conceit of what he's trying to do with the story. Well, and it just surprised me so much that I was just like,
so
I had to reread it a couple times because I was just like, wait, what?
So just to throw in my little, maybe a slightly different take I had, I think like I thought, and I think Cantling thought that the final portrait was going to be the rapist. It was going to be like the monster. It was going to be his like worst monster that he ever wrote, and that the monster was going to come take revenge on him and do something horrible to him, and he was dreading that, right? And then he cuts open the painting, and it's not the monster; it's actually the victim.
Yeah.
And then magically doesn't remember his daughter anymore. And it's like, it's like that daughter has replaced his true daughter. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there is like, I have it open right here. Best of all, he liked her smile. It was a lovely smile, a smile that illuminated her whole face. The smile seemed to remind him of someone he had known once. He couldn't remember who. And that's the part that makes you go, oh, he's just totally forgotten that his daughter exists. Yeah. He's gone so far into his characters, his children, which are these characters, that he's forgotten his real children at all. And I think there is, I don't know, I think there's still room for a read of that here. You just have to kind of like ignore that one last sentence, that one that he ordered the portraits himself.
Yeah, because that was my first take, was her revenge on him. Like he thought her revenge on him was going to be some horrible act of violence, but actually it was just really and truly erasing herself from his life and giving him what he wants, which is to just live with his fictional characters, his real children, right? These are his real children, is how she would say it.
They come from his brain, not his.
You could make an argument that all happens still, and it's still him that ordered them, because I mean, his daughter, I think, made it pretty clear when she walked out of that room that she wants nothing to do with him anymore, and she's done with him. And so you can make an argument that all still happened, and he ordered the portraits for himself to, like, because he's so lonely and miserable that he's reconstructing.
He's hallucinating.
He's getting the daughter he wanted, right? Like this version of the portrait is the character he wanted. It's the daughter he wanted, the version of the daughter that he invented in his head, and he's completely trashed this inconvenient daughter that doesn't line up with the narrative of his life, because she's a real person that has her own wants and needs, and he's gotten rid of her and replaced her with the version of his daughter that he likes, with that smile. That's all he did, her fucking smile.
Yeah, and I feel like he's retreating into like delusions of this one perspective where he is totally like, I mean, his characters rant at him, but like he doesn't necessarily he doesn't take that in really.
Yeah,
right? The criticisms and such.
Yeah, it's not Scrooge where you see it affecting him. It's like you just see it annoying him and making him mad, and then he doesn't actually change or grow due to any of it. And
well, it's so funny because it annoys him in the moment, but then he likes it, right? Like the conversation with Donahue pisses him off, but then the next day he's like, actually, I hope he comes back. Yeah. And then of course Sissy comes and he bangs her, and he's like, oh, I really hope she comes back. Like right. he's if there's any lessons to be taken away from these ghosts of asshole past, then he is not
very clever. Scott, got him.
Thank you. he's not picking up on them at all.
Yeah. I think I'm revising my reading to be that he did have a daughter. Maybe she even left, like, that fight was like 5 years ago, and he's just been like alone and stewing in this with her slashed up portrait sitting over the fire for all this time, and he's just kind of broken. And because like we see that he's capable of great delusion and failing to see things, so it's totally possible that he commissioned all these artworks and then like deluded himself into thinking that his daughter did it.
I think that's along the lines is what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot more, and I like that so much. That's what it is.
Okay. It can be a bit more textual for sure, but
I think he could have sold it a little bit better. But I think that's exactly what it is, that he decided that he wanted to fully embrace his children, aka the characters he created, and so he commissioned this artwork to do it, and then built a story around it that this was part of his daughter's reconciliation. And the daughter is not the Michelle that we've seen the whole time. It's this Rachel that he made up. And so like this is like he's reconciled with his daughter because he has her picture back, and this is the only thing he cared about on that picture was the smile, and so he's replaced the other one with this new one. It's gone now, and
it that kind of, so the daughter is real, but she's not mailing him these things. She's just off living her life somewhere.
Because she said, fuck off, I want nothing to do with you anymore, I'm never going to talk to you again, and she meant it.
So there's no magic.
Yeah. So some stuff I find interesting just in that particular, uh, I don't want to say part, but I don't know, this collection of icons, right? So the original painting of her is a self portrait, right? So she drew that, and it's like a perfect rendition of herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he steals some of that, and says that he loves to smile, she literally takes it back.
Yeah.
The eyes too, and with vicious cuts. Um, and then this other one is it's commissioned by him, and it's based off of his character. So I feel like it's like it is more like his creation.
Yeah.
I'm seeing those things there.
Yeah, it's a version of her
Yeah.
that he wanted her to be.
It's
complete with the smile, which was the most important part to him. That's all he cared about was her damn smile. Like, God, he's such an asshole.
right. Probably just like his character probably looked just like his daughter because he's a hack. So
Mm-hmm.
he would have just done that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. Then I like that because I was going back and forth where I'm like, I want to be able to talk about this as a story about parent-child relationships, but if the daughter wasn't ever real, then it's not really a parent-child relationship story. But I think the daughter was real, and all of the stuff that happened with the daughter was true. She just wasn't actually sending the painting. So
Yeah,
that's good. Now that we've sorted that out after 45 minutes of talking, we can talk about how it's a parent-child story, just like the other one, except in this particular case, he was a monster.
Yeah, let's talk about these two stories together and why Joneleth maybe decided to put these two together, because I do think both of these stories use a magical realism type lens to explore the concept of a parent-child relationship and the ways in which those relationships can be deeply unhealthy. I think it's great that on the one side we have the child who is to blame for the terrible relationship, and then on the other side, in George R.R. Martin's story, it is clearly the parent. It is clearly the fault of the parent, and so yeah, I mean they're kind of two angles to which both of these stories can be destructive, and they both revolve around the one figure wanting that person to be something else. Like Jack wants his mother to be an American. He doesn't want her to be a Chinese woman. He wants her to be American. He wants her to fit in culturally. He wants her to look like everyone else. He wants her to act like everyone else. That's what he wants in her. And that's kind of the same in this story as well, right? The children he likes the most are the ones he created in mind. Like they're when you have a child, you create a physical person, but who they are defined as is something you don't have a lot of control over. You can steer them, but who they become is really up to them. And he wants, I think he even talks about that in the story, right? That he talks about the creation of the mind, the creation of who they are as a person, how they behave, what they act like. And he desires that full control. And it's the thing that drives him the most crazy is when his wife and his daughter don't fall in line in that. So he creates new versions of them that do.
Yeah. And kind of takes possessions of the parts of them that he wants and then puts them to his own purposes.
Yeah. He hasn't written any stories about his daughter at all in 8 books. And it's not until she's raped that he says, this is a thing in your personality, daughter, that I can use and exploit. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, Christ. A scumbag.
It is like the part where he's like justifying it as saying like, I had to process it in my own way. And that was to write it. And then since I wrote it, I had to publish it. is like, okay, like God, like you totally understand this character. Like that's what's so kind of great about it is he's awful, but you totally understand.
You can feel those thoughts as if you can feel them sort of like echo in a different version of yourself, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine being so lonely and isolated and like just craving of any kind of like acceptance and understanding that like the rest of your life is basically just a big blank, but you have this story that you could totally just use to get back in the spotlight. and like the temptation of that. Like you can put, I mean, of course, right? That's the George R.R. Martin thing. That's his now in at this point in time. That is in fact what he is known for, is taking absolute piece of shit characters and making you empathize with them and understand them.
And I think that's part of why he annoys you so much and why you hate him so much, is that you can see that thought process, and it triggers something in you that where you can understand the thought process, and that makes you even angry because it maybe reveals something about your own internal workings that you might not want to admit. When you can empathize with that, you're like, oh fuck, what's wrong with me? And that's when you get really angry and upset about it. I think he excels at that, and that is absolutely what this character is.
Yeah, it's definitely going to make me be more on the lookout for those excuses that we give ourselves, the rationalizations of like, hey, this thing that is going to benefit me mostly, it might even hurt someone else, but it's like this is different because I already wrote it, so
we're so good at that rationalization,
right? I mean, him saying like that it wasn't meant to hurt you, it's like as if that is an excuse.
Which totally irrelevant. Yeah,
but like to a person who is prone to that kind of self-justification, that's totally the type of thing they would say. Like, I didn't mean to hurt you, so you can't be mad at me about this.
Yeah, it's like, I think part of it also is like her telling him the story of her rape. Like, it defines him as the good one, the trustworthy one. Like, that's the part of the story that's like, I couldn't tell this to mom, I couldn't tell this to anyone, but I can tell it to you, dad. That slides so perfectly into his self-image of him as the best parent that writing it down and sharing it with the world is almost a form of like bragging. Like, she told this to me. Look, everyone, look. She trusted me with this story.
Watch me betray her.
It's so well designed, despicably. Like I haven't read A Song of Ice and Fire in a while. It's been a while since my last reread, because I said I'll start my next reread when the publishing date for Winds of Winter happens. So obviously it's been a long time since I've read those books. So reading this book was like a reminder of the way he writes these despicable characters to me, and it made me kind of want to go reread those books again.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like an unbelievable amount of callousness and cruelty, but it's also like this totally could happen.
Yeah, I mean, you do kind of question that, right? Like, where you're like, can a person really be like this?
Oh,
and
yeah,
I think the answer
for
is
sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
Hands down.
But yeah, I mean, I think we kind of jumped back into the story because we're so angry at it. But I like justification, right? I think is a big thing here, that Jack justified his actions against his mother, just like Canling justifies his actions in what stories he chooses to tell and what he doesn't. I also think it must just be hard. Like, not that his wife did anything wrong in that story, but I think it also must just be hard to be married to a creator where just like everything you read is like, oh, that's the me character, isn't it? That's like, I think in this story, it's obviously clear that yes, the nagging wife was 100% meant to be his wife. But I can also just imagine this situation where you're reading something that someone's written that is a family member and just going, oh, so that's me.
Yeah,
that's the one you made me.
Experiencing that, just the nervousness around that. I'm writing this one story which has a lot to do with like parents and acceptance and things, and I'm just like, well, okay, great. I'm not going to be able to ever show them this because they're gonna, even if it's not like explicitly them, right? There's always going to be an echo. That's inescapable, intentional or unintentional. Yeah, and like if you want to actually write a good story. You kind of need to, otherwise you're not using your own experience.
Or even if it is genuinely original and you're like, no, really, this is nothing to do with you. They're just not going to believe you. So why bother?
Gosh, that's scary. Anything else y'all want to talk about either of these stories or both of them together? Or it makes me, I'm already like terrified of being a father, just so you know. And reading both of these stories didn't really fill me with a lot of confidence here.
Hey, these are warning signs. Just don't do what happened in these. It'll be fine.
Okay, that is. I'll write those down. I'll say, do not behave like this.
So don't be like the guy who obsesses over his fictional children much more than his actual children. So don't, I guess, obsess over your podcast too much.
Okay, good to know.
And with the other one, I think be anti-racist. That's one of the main ones.
Okay, done.
And don't order a mail order bride. I think that's the other one.
Elise, I gotta return you.
So this has been Matias's horoscopes from 2 short stories.
All right. So thank you so much, Joneleth, for making us read those stories. I think part of this Patreon goal is basically like curation, right? We're telling our supporters to curate a list of movies and stories we read or watch, and it's always a pleasure when I get to dive into something I've never experienced before. That I probably would not have picked up George R.R. Martin's short story that he wrote almost 35 years ago.
Yeah, so. I mean, considering how difficult it was to pick up, it's like I never would have come across it otherwise.
Yeah. That's weird, right? I think like Matt and I are doing a podcast on Stephen King, and Stephen King is an extremely popular author, and like every single thing he's ever published has been like re-released and redistributed and all these things. It is not hard to there's one story of Stephen King's that's hard to find, and that's because he specifically chose to remove it from print because it was written in the 80s and involves a school shooting, and he decided in the 90s that like, I don't want people to read this story because I don't think it's good, and I don't think reading stories about school shootings when there's a rampant problem about them is a good thing. So he pulled it from publication. But like every one of his stories is easy to find. George R.R. Martin, I mean, maybe not as big of an author as Stephen King, but one of the most well-known and well-celebrated fantasy authors of our time. Like, so many of his collections have not been republished, and it's just, that's kind of crazy to me. I don't understand why. Someone must not, I wonder if there's rights issues, or I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, if we're just talking about branding, right? George R.R. Martin is definitely known for the one thing.
Sure.
And Stephen King is just known as Stephen King. Like,
that's true.
Yeah.
That might just be like, because George R. R. Martin has a bunch of other series, but I don't hear people talking about those either. One of them is like a fantasy noir or something.
There's the wild card stuff.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's superheroes.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
I
don't know what I'm thinking about. Anyway,
but he doesn't write all those either. I think he just writes some of them, and some of them are
Yeah, he also has a sci-fi kind of space opera series, universe, and he's written a number of things like that. That's what's interesting is like you would think based on the last few years that the guy has maybe written, a handful of books in his life because he writes so goddamn slowly, but actually he used to write really fast. I think it's just this latest book like that. Like where he's taken Song of Ice and Fire into a place that he doesn't know how to handle, but that doesn't mean he's a slow writer categorically. I don't know. It's interesting.
I went to Barnes and Noble and I searched George R.R. Martin, right? And the only stuff they had was the Song of Ice and Fire stuff. And I agree, that is what he's most well known for. But I don't know. You figure like, how much does it cost to republish a short story collection?
Well, it's not really about how much it costs, is it? Will people actually read it? And I think that's where it gets more difficult because I don't know how many people actually like read short stories now, I guess. I mean, that still happens. I read Paper Menagerie with the paperback, but it certainly is. I don't know. I actually have no idea how much people read now. I need to look at the stats of that because like everyone I know says that they can't read anymore. So
they can't?
Well, you know what I mean. Like they don't read books anymore.
Yeah.
Which is tragic, I think. But
yeah, I don't have enough understanding of how the industry works to be like, this totally doesn't make sense. But it was just very surprising to me because I figured, when an author takes off into superstardom land, like the first thing you want to do is republish all their old shit and say, look, this is that guy. You want to read this now, right?
Right. You've at least when you've got that much name recognition, then you can probably make money just by people being like oh, I'm gonna buy that short story collection for my friend who I know really likes Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's enough to make you money at that point. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I do think it's strange, but
It's very strange. But we will never get to the bottom of it. We'll never know.
We'll never know. If someone knows, please tell us.
Yes, please let us know.
Send us an email at
us.
What's our main email?
doofmedia@gmail.com.
Okay. You can also send me a private email at Matias@doofmedia.com, and I can break the news. This is very important.
Yeah, send it to Matias.
I'm our correspondent officially right now until I'm replaced.
All right. So those are those two short stories. Thank you again, Joneleth, for suggesting those. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And Matias, thank you for coming on and hanging out with us and
of course.
And talking about these.
Thanks for I also want to say thank you for recommending these stories, and specifically Ken Liu's story, because I want to see him succeed. He's a cool guy.
Cool.
I like his stuff.
All right. We're gonna let you go, Matias, so we can talk about The Mandalorian without spoiling it for you.
Sure thing. But happy Black Friday to everyone who's listening to when this episode comes out. Please don't get trampled or COVID. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the second one is probably. I mean, I guess not getting trampled is important, but if there's enough people that you can be trampled,
you probably shouldn't be there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what you could be working there. I don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have to go buy a refrigerator on Saturday.
Oh, dear
I'm
Lord.
scared. I'm very scared. But we have to order this thing to get it to our new house in time, and it's gonna be scary.
I wish you luck.
Thanks.
Doof.
All right, Matt. So before we go for the week, I wanted to talk to you about the Disney Plus hit show, The Mandalorian. I think we talked about the first season a little bit last year. I don't remember, but I'm assuming we did. And because I think we both really enjoyed it last year.
I don't even remember what we talked about it, but yes, I love this show, and I've watched all 4 episodes of season 2. So
yeah, so have I. So this will be full spoilers for all 4 episodes of season 2 of The Mandalorian. I guess I think by the time this episode comes out, season 5 will be out, but it's not out at the time of recording, so we haven't watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, this show's real good. And it's doing a lot of things that I really, really like. And it's doing it in a way that I'm really enjoying it. I think this is like my favorite Star Wars thing since 1982.
Yeah, I mean, it may just sort of be my favorite Star Wars thing, actually.
Wow.
I mean, and I don't know, man. I don't know if I can substantiate that, but it's really fun. Like, it's just always a really fun time. And there's a variety between the episodes in terms of like, the tone and the, sometimes it's funnier, sometimes it's more serious, sometimes it's a Western, it's I think one of the things I said, like the first thing I said to you after I finished one of the episodes is like, this show is just a love letter from people who love this who love Star Wars to people who love Star Wars. Because like just the fun references, and it's not, I don't know, like there was something so annoying and forced about all of the like references in the prequel, the sequel trilogy, and like a lot of stuff you'll see where, or like the new Star Trek movies where you're just like rolling your eyes. But for some reason, somehow like all of the in jokes are just like, I'm just grinning the whole time. I think it's because they're often visual rather than here's a catchphrase.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. Like, I agree with you on that. I think that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about the most is the ways in which this show does the same kind of referential stuff that any new Star Wars thing does now, but it does it in a much better way. I think it's because it does it in a way that doesn't impact the story. I feel like in a movie like Solo, and a movie like Rogue One, and even my favorite of the new Star Wars movies, The Last Jedi, there are moments where the story kind of stops to say, here's a thing that you remember. Do you remember this thing? Like the whole production of the movie like halts, and it's like, remember this? This is how this happened, and this is a reference to this. And I feel like The Mandalorian just does them, and it doesn't. Like, it doesn't wink at you when it's doing it. Like, and here's the reason I believe that. I don't know half the shit that this show is referencing. Like there are definitely some of the visual gags, and we'll get into those in a bit. But like, I watch this episode and then I go online and I see all these articles that are like, who was this person revealed? Like blah, blah, blah is a huge name reveal. And I'm just like, what? And it's because like as far as Star Wars goes, I have not watched any of the cartoons. I have never read any of the expanded universe stuff. And I know Disney, when they bought it, like carved the expanded universe stuff out, but they did that very specifically so they could like selectively bring some of the stuff back in. And so I think that's part of what they're doing. I think a lot of it is relating to the Clone Wars stuff as well. But I don't get any of that stuff. And most importantly, I don't need to. The show is constructed to where every character moment, every plot moment, every little bit of each episode works independent of all the external bullshit that Star Wars fans like to see because they understood that reference. And so the ones I do pick up on, I'm like, hey. Yeah. And the ones I don't pick up on, I'm just like, okay. Like, I don't know what the fuck a dark lightsaber is. I don't know what, I have no idea what that means or what it says about the ongoing Star Wars canon. I have no idea who the Breaking Bad main bad guy is. I have no idea who he is. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that Mando gets Baby Yoda to the planet he's trying to get Baby Yoda to, and hopefully doesn't go on too many zany adventures along the way that like, what matters to me is that his ship has been through shit over the past 3 episodes.
It's like the joke of this season is his ship just getting destroyed. The first season was the story of him getting awesome armor. This season is the story of his ship getting trashed.
Yeah. And that's like, I think the second episode of the season is like one of my favorite episodes of TV this year, which is just like they get marooned on an ice planet and they just have to survive on this ice planet. Meanwhile, Baby Yoda is like driving a species to extinction by continuing to eat its eggs, which is hilarious. And it's just fun. And I think like it is, you said it's a letter from Star Wars fans to Star Wars fans, but Star Wars fans in the classic sense of that phrase. Like it is a Star Wars show in the vein of the episodic serial science fiction things of the 40s and 50s of which Star Wars was based, right? Like where you have these episodic zany one-off adventures, they're still bothering to do a full plot. There's like a main plot to this whole show, but for the most part, it's just like Mando he's trying to get to this place and someone says, okay, I'll get you there, but you have to do this for me. And he's like, okay. And so the episode is just him doing that thing, and fun adventure and hilarity happens. And it's just a joy. It's just a joy to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did talk about this before, and I think what I said then was like it's what Star Wars is supposed to feel like, according to me and probably other people born in the mid '80s. I mean, the kind of visual gag that made me feel the most warm and fuzzy was the troop carrier that they use in the 4th episode of this season, which is just a troop carrier. There's nothing special about it, but it happens to be exactly the same as this toy that was my grandparents had bought because they had a bunch of Star Wars toys for some reason. So as soon as I saw it, even under a tarp, I was like, that's the toy from my childhood that was never in any movie. It was just a toy, right? It was just a toy. And then they found that toy and they put it in the show. And I was like, and like you said, it doesn't matter. Like you didn't know that and it didn't affect you.
Nope.
But like it just shows kind of like the love and the desire to kind of, I mean, I think that's one thing I like about it is the fun thing for me about Star Wars as a kid was like imagining this rich universe that just kind of goes on and on into the distance around you, and it's full of all these details, and you'll never know all of it. You'll never plumb the full depths of it. You see Boba Fett, he's mysterious, you know, and then you kind of imagine yourself like, well, I want to know more about Boba Fett. That doesn't mean tell me a story about Boba Fett. That means I want to go explore the go exploring in that world. And so this is them saying, okay, we're going to tell a story about Boba Fett, except it's not Boba Fett. It's another guy, but he looks just like Boba Fett. And we're going to play. We're playing. We're kids and we're playing and we're having fun. And that's what Star Wars is supposed to be.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things here, I said this last season and I'm saying it, I'm still not entirely clear what a Mandalorian is. and I think I remain convinced that is absolutely fine and does not matter towards the enjoyment of the show at all.
Yeah. I actually think it's preferable. It's sort of like how I never actually wanted to know that the Jedis all lived in a Jedi temple and they were literally the secret police of the old Republic. Like, it was better when it was just like the Jedi are they're like night wizard monks or something. You don't really know. We don't really know what the Jedi are in the original trilogy. Like, it's not. Yeah. It's very sort of, it's almost like contradictory, and like Yoda lives in the swamp, and you're left to put it together on your own, right? And in this show, we're left to basically put together what Mandalorians are. And as far as we're concerned, the Mandalorians are a race of gunslingers.
Yeah.
Which is exactly, storytelling wise, all that matters. So
yeah, and they introduced a slight wrinkle in this in the third episode, where we met a trio of Mandalorians that don't follow the way. Like we along with our main character. I think that the best part of this is the reason why I think we are not quite clear on what the Mandalorians are is because our main character is also not quite clear on what Mandalorians are. Where we learn in that episode that his assumption was that this was just what all Mandalorians believed and practices. You never take off the helmet. This is the way. And we learn that no, actually, it seems to be that was like a super conservative sect of Mandalorians that broke off. That is the assumption here. And that's, I think that's just enough of a wrinkle that it doesn't that doesn't bog down the story into like diving deep into the past of the Mandalorians, but it also just helps define our character as a guy who like is a certain thing, but also doesn't fully understand even what his thing is. Cause I think that's part of what his journey is figuring out like who he is and where he belongs and what he should do. It's great.
Oh yeah. I mean, as soon as they introduce the idea that he's going to run into these other Mandalorians and they're not really real Mandalorians, I love that. Or rather, the implication is that maybe he's not a real Mandalorian.
Right.
I love that because I was like, yeah, the way he reacts to it is perfect. And then it creates, I think, a really great opportunity for evolution of his character where he can decide whether he wants to like sort of embrace this creed with his, with full awareness of the fact that maybe it's not exactly what he thought it was.
Yeah.
And like that's a really cool idea for character growth for this character, right? And way better than just kind of info dumping on us what Mandalorians are. It's all told through the characters because that's all we care about.
Yeah, totally. And my biggest fear going into this season was Baby Yoda became a phenomenon after the first season, and a phenomenon that they did not predict, hilariously enough, because they did not have any toys ready or any merchandising ready, and they have subsequently merchandised the shit out of Baby Yoda. And I was worried that the temptation was going to be, we got to put this fucking guy in every single scene because we have to lean into the love of Baby Yoda. And like, he's definitely in the show more than in the first season, but I've been pretty impressed with the use of him, which is normally like, we understand he's like a baby, so like we can't like have him do stuff, but they find something for him to do every episode, and it's usually a short little joke, and it works. Like the egg eating was wonderful. In the latest episode when he uses the Force on the space macaroons was like the greatest thing I've ever seen, where he's just put to school and he uses the Force and Force pulls the macaroons and eats them, is the most wonderful thing I've ever seen. And then that's just it, right? Like they just do that, have that little bit, and then they move on with the rest of the story. And I think it's working. It's the perfect amount, in my opinion.
Yeah. I got nothing to add there. I think it's like they continue to play it on just the right level of like, this is a fun little comic relief thing that doesn't ever become too much.
Yeah.
And it's perfect. I was just going to say one thing I didn't realize until glancing over the Wikipedia right now is that Like there have been 12 episodes of the Mandalorian so far.
Yeah.
And 10 of those episodes have been written by Jon Favreau.
Yeah, he's like doing all of it. Yeah.
Like just Jon Favreau, not even Jon Favreau and like that. That's God. Like if I ever have a property that I need made into a movie, I'm getting Jon Favreau because
he's doing a great job. I mean, the cool thing is he's doing a great job, and he's getting his friends in to do directing stuff, right? Like he does. I think he's only directed one episode himself, but he's gotten Taika Waititi, and Peyton Reed came in and did an episode. This Bryce Dallas Howard has done a couple, I think now.
Yeah.
And Carl Weathers directed the last episode.
Yeah. Which was actually, I thought, really well done. Like the action. I mean, it is a very action heavy episode, but the action looks fantastic. It's, the stuff with the ship battles. You're just like, what world is this that we have this quality of, special effects and everything in a TV show? Yeah.
It's called the Disney Plus world, Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I'm paying nothing for this, and it's amazing,
Well, I mean, you are paying for it.
I mean, relatively speaking, right? It's like we're paying just this world we live in now. Like it used to be you paid $10 for any single time you wanted to watch anything, basically, almost.
Sure, fair. Yeah. I also just want to say that I love Baby Yoda's selective use of the Force, which is like they're in mortal danger like constantly, and he's just sitting there like not doing nothing, but like there's some cookies across the way. He's just like, "Yep, we're gonna get those."
Yeah.
It's fucking great. I love the stupid puppet. I love the stupid puppet so much.
I love my favorite. I was completely unhinged by him being in the crawl space of the ship. Remove the blue one.
Oh my God.
And then insert the red one. No, you don't want to let them touch. Remove the blue. It just goes on for like 3 times longer. It's the thing where like it stops being funny and then it becomes funnier than it ever was. And then
I mean, it's so good. It's so good, and it's the perfect amount, and it's fun, and it's adventure, and it's comedy, and it's everything that Star Wars was when I watched it the first time.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the action, and one thing I told you before we were having a text chat about this, but like in the new Star Wars blasters, especially in this show, I really like them. They're taking the original blaster noise, but they've found a way to put weight behind the noise in a way that like when someone gets hit with the blaster, you feel it. Like I think that's like if you go back and watch A New Hope, that's one thing you see where like these blasters are hitting these people and they're just kind of throwing their hands up in the air and falling over, and you just don't feel the impact. And what they've done in these new Star Wars stuff is they put that weight behind the blast where through the sound design, you kind of feel the hit and you feel like, that guy just got fucked.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good sound effect. Whoever made the decision to put that extra sound effect when the blasters connect with something did a really good job.
Yeah, I agree. Everything about the combat, both with blasters, because a lot. I mean, that's worth mentioning. Like, it's very cool because you've got Mando is just this badass, and I thought I was too old for badasses. I really did. I thought that I was at that age where you've seen it all, and it's just like and then he's going to kick everybody's ass. But the show just manages to always be kind of fresh and clever and fast paced and interesting with the visuals and the way they're going about things. And I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that like the Mando with no name could not keep a series going for the 16 episodes we're going to have plus more. But I agree that they've taken that man with no name archetype and they've done interesting things with him to the point where it doesn't get tiring. You don't roll your eyes at the badass with the heart of gold archetype that we're dealing with here, especially considering the fact that we don't see his face ever. And he has to emote through gestures and head turns and Pedro Pascal's performance of his voice, which has been just wonderful.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like there's so much of the show that shouldn't work, and yet it's working really, really well.
Yeah.
I love it.
Me too.
I do hope, like, all this being said, I do hope that, like, as we're halfway through the season, as we round the finish line of season 2, we don't really dive into the Star Warsy stuff, you know,
Lore.
like
I feel like the formula. I feel like the reason why this works is that it has a formula, and the formula is each of these episodes is a good story, and many of these episodes have some amount of here's some Star Wars backstory shit in there.
Mm-hmm.
But even like, you know, episode 8 of the previous season, where, you know, they were giving us kind of more than usual, that was still a fairly straightforward story about, you know, the characters are like bottled up in the there's a lot of good drama in it, is what I'm trying to say. Like, the guy that you like dies, and just overall a lot of good drama. And yeah, there's some, you know, Star Wars-y shit in there, right? And I think that's just what they're going to keep doing. Like, it's always going to be, okay, the episode, it's a good, solid story, and they're going to weave in whatever they need to weave in into the middle of it. It's not going to, I really would be surprised and pretty disappointed if it just jumped off of the rails of being a serialized gunslinger story and suddenly became Mando enters into episode 6.5 of
Sure.
of the Star Wars canon, you know.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you've shown more faith and optimism than I did, and I think I want you to be right, and therefore I'm going to choose to accept that and say you're absolutely right, and I need to have faith in the show.
Yeah, well, in our 2010s recap episode, I also said that I thought 2020 was going to be a great year, so you can do what you will with my predictions.
So this is all of this is your fault. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
So that's the Mandalorian. 4 episodes. Maybe we'll circle back around at the end of the season and talk about it again, because I love the show, and I think there's a lot to talk about in what is a relatively simple show, where I think it is doing what it's doing very well, but it's not like the most complicated thing I've ever watched. I think there's a lot to talk about still.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, that is all we had for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on The Mandalorian or on either of the 2 short stories we talked about on this week's episode, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account @doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not already subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to do so and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
Yes, and you can find this on all of our shows, including Matias' show, Do the Right Thing, over at our website, doofmedia.com. If you like Do the Right Thing or the Doofcast or any of the shows we have on the network, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can be like Joneleth and head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at the Doof Warrior level and make us watch a movie or talk about a short story. Once again, we want to thank Joneleth for supporting us and for bringing these 2 short stories to us. We really appreciate that. And we want to thank Matias, who left us behind when we decided to talk about Star Wars. We want to thank him for being on the show.
Yeah. I think that was a fun conversation. It's always fun to have another voice in there.
Yeah.
Also, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That's right. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving and a good day after Black Friday, whatever. And we will see you next week. We're heading back to Del Toro land with his next film, the 3rd film in our Deconstructing series. Next week, we'll be talking about The Devil's Backbone.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.